All right, welcome back. This video will be covering marking your lines to put your reinforcement tapes on. Let me do a quick explanation to you beginners. When we talk about reinforcement tape, it's not really tape, it's just the same material cut in this, what we call a tape. It's pinked edge on both sides to not fray. A lot of times when you order medium fabric like this is the 102. That's what we call the medium fabric. The tapes to go on medium fabric usually is made from a lighter grade fabric. It's just usually one off, but the heavy grade fabric is made from this. It's not a need really to worry about, but you know, there'll be a heavy and a light tape. A lot of times we just like using the lightweight tape on these. And what a reinforcement is we're going to show about marking it. But anytime that fabric is glued to a hard point and right here and it's flying, and let's just say the propeller's beating at it or whatever, there's a hard joint there. Our paint is very flexible. I mean, we've got paints on planes that's in excess of 20 to 25 years. I had a guy call the other day that's recovered one that's right at 20 years and it's never seen the hanger except the day it was covered, and it's still flexible. But you know, you'll have that little hard point that is doing a lot of vibration and everything, and what the pinking tape, what we call it, putting it on there, bridges that spot and just gives it like a double layer of covering, just kind of reinforces that. Also, it's for covering all of this reinforcement tape and stitching that we did, and all around your edges. So usually when you're looking around on your plane, you say, where should I put pinking tape? Usually I always like to say, anytime there's fabric, leaving a hard spot, go into an open weave. Your fuselage stringers down the side, they'll get it. I've noticed a lot of planes nowadays are getting away from putting it on the side stringer, because you got basically a stringer that the fabric is just barely making a radius over it, and it's just kind of a hard spot, you know. So, you know, I've seen some of them not putting that on it nowadays. And, you know, you probably could put pinking tape here, go ahead and prime it, and it no doubt will probably last just about as long. But it's kind of the way they did it in the old days, and it's just an extra reinforcement of putting on here. At this point, we'll talk about marking out for your pinking tapes going across these stitches. Like I mentioned, sometimes these do vary. What I like to do is just take an actual piece that you're going to be using, and we found just either take a tape measure and mark the center, or just fold it over to get you a center line. Put you a center line there. And just to make it fast, you run across here and you can just look at this, because you've already took the time to get this exactly on top of the rib and everything. And you can just eyeball a center line there. And I like to lay it down. Just line those center up and mark just out to the tip of your pinked edge. And that'll lay a mark out. No curves, there's not need in using the flexible. This works fine. Just lay your line across there. And this usually will tell if you have some kind of a little curve in the rib or something's happening. If these lines line up, that's fine. Go ahead and mark them. If there is some kind of a curve, then you need to go to that line, to that line, to that line, to that line. But with that said, you just line up your marks. And all this is just laying out a good guideline for your glue. So you mark those. I'm going to probably in another video have Brian come back, because he's used a lot of the bias plate tape, and we'll explain what bias plate tape is at that point. A lot of people don't use it. We sell quite a bit of it because it costs a little bit more, but it does save a lot of time going like around these corners. And there's a proper way of doing it, and there's another way that it could cause you more problem than it's worth. The reinforcement tape up here, now you can, as long as your reinforcement is out on the open weave, whether it's a ½ inch or an inch or whatever, as long as it's out on it, that's all it needs. Now, one way you can do it is say, well, I'm going to be to here, take your flat tape measure, go all the way around and measure and see what comes closest, you know, like a 3 inch or a 4 inch wide or whatever it's going to take to go from one side to the other, and then cut that piece. Say it was a 4 inch wide piece or a 3 inch wide. Cut that, mark a center in here right in the very front, put that on it, and let's say this was a little wider, and it come around to here, wrap it to both sides. Do the same thing you did here. Mark it here, mark the other side. Bring your line all the way down. That gets your line ready for the front piece. I'll explain that one piece going on. The other way people can do it is, say you're just going to use a 2-inch. And let's say you come down here and just eyeball just about to the center of the post and put a mark. That way you can put one piece onto the center, the other piece of the center. That's perfectly fine. You're going to have a double pinked edge in the front, but that's in the hinge point. You really don't see it. You can iron that down smooth and it'll be fine. Out here on your trailing edge, or your bottom trailing edge here, some people will just lay it right up here to the edge. That works fine. There's an awful lot of tape out there that's not really needed. And you're going to have this little bit of a pinked line that's going to be primed and ironed down under the primer, under the paint. Probably not going to see it, but to make it clean, you know, you can either use this piece right here and put it right at the corner, and that'll give you enough here and enough down here, and then whatever overhangs, skip back up on the flat part and put a little mark when you get ready to put your tape on. Then cut that off so it ain't hanging completely off the other side. Or you can just lay it on here to where most of the pinking edge is just almost to the bottom, and just go with whatever's out here. Whichever way you're going to do it, then lay that line out, and then you do the same thing with your straight edge and put on that. Like I said, we won't mark that around there. We'll leave that for another time, and I'll go ahead and mark all these up, and then we'll talk about laying out the glue. All right. Now that we've got our lines marked, like I said, I'm just going to mark these top ones here. We'll be using the thin 1 part 55, 3 parts 4,000. And like I mentioned in the first video, if it's hot where you're working and you keep, you know, working along, and an hour later, your glue is going to thicken up because the reducer is constantly evaporating out of it. So we're running a thin mixture at this point. Like I mentioned in video 1, have a good brush. I like the ones that has a little bit of an angle cut. Don't right off the bat think 2-inch wide tape, 2-inch wide brush. I've got this knocked out. It don't work. You need at least narrower than the 2-inch. And keep your brushes fairly dry as you're coming across your raw fabric. What I like to do is just take your time. Now, this is the very first part of, you know, when we was putting all this fabric on, we was trying to be pretty neat, but at this point, this is one of, I guess if you would say that there's a downfall to Airtech coating system, this, in my book, would be it. I have used almost all of the other systems and had great success with every one of them. Every one of them I've had really nice paint jobs. Our shop still uses different systems according to what the customer wants, but the downfall is, as some of you guys have used the Stitz process, you know, you're going to put your tape down with that same brush on procedure with your pink or your gray with the star gloss. You need to still lay the extra line down for your tape. We still mark them and try to keep them in, but you don't, this is going to be open weave to the time that we put the fabric wash on and get it ready, because our system's designed for the primer goes into the fabric and holds it. There's no layer of glue under this or anything. It goes in and holds the fabric to stay flexible all the way across. Anytime that you come out of this line with some glue, and it's not the end of the world, but what you'll see is after you're completely done, you'll look up on the wing or something, everywhere that glue, like I mentioned earlier on, would be the weave has got glue in it, so the fabric cannot sink into it. And then when you put the fabric primer on, it's going to stand on top of that glue. So you want to try to stay inside the line. See, there's one little tiny drip right there. If you see something, go ahead and take your finger, kind of clean it up, and, you know, just try to stay as close to the end, because you remember you put that mark to the outside of the pinking tape. So you want to lay this thin out to the very edge. So normally just kind of take your time, and you'll get a routine of laying this brush down. And just as soon as you go across and it's laying a good wet trail behind it, there's no need in working it out. Just lay a solid, you can look against the light and see a solid. And just as soon as it looks like it starts to get a little thin and get little streaks in it, redip your brush, come right back on, flip your brush around to the other point. You know, this will be left or right-handed, whichever way you're going to put it on. but just try to stay right at that line. And you'll go across all of these. Wait about 5 to 10 minutes or whatever. See, a lot of this is already drying. I got a wet spot right there and right through there. As soon as it gets dry, it'll be ready for a second coat of thin to go over everything. So you're going to put a thin coat on all your lines. And you know, if you're fixing to put this leading edge around here, I like to, at this point, only do these, because you'll get ahead of yourself and you'll say, you know, if I were to get this one marked, this would be an okay one to go ahead and glue. Actually, you would need to do this one and go ahead and glue it. What you'll do is when we get ready to lay these tapes on and we cut them, say, up here to the edge, when we lay this other piece of tape around here, the top of that's going to need a little bit more glue, because remember, we put down 2 thin coats. We're going to need a little bit more glue on the tops of those tapes. So I like to, instead of going ahead and gluing all this and having to remember to come back and glue on top of our tape, I like to just do whichever pieces that I'm in the process of doing. So lay your one layer of thin glue on all of your tape lines. Wait till it dries, and if it's a warm day, it's going to just happen really fast. Now, if you're in a shop that's not air conditioned or whatever, and you're like we are here in Arkansas, very humid weather, you're going to have issues, because just to the nature of any kind of a reducer trying to evaporate really fast out of the cup, well, it's going to be doing the same thing here. And with the humidity, it's going to be evaporating so fast, it's going to have a cooling effect. And when it does that, it's going to collect moisture. So if you're putting this on, all of a sudden you're getting this weird white looking haze to it or something, there's nothing wrong with the glue or anything. It's just sucking in moisture. You're just going to have to stop and walk away for an hour or whatever until that evaporates on out and it cools off. Because if you don't, then the glue's going to act like it's wanting to roll up and beat up, and it's just not going to do right. You want it to be clear. So 1 layer, let it dry to the touch. 2 layers. At this point, I'll go ahead and get the 2 layers on, and we'll be ready to lay tapes on. All right. Now I've got 2 coats of thin on all these. One thing I wanted to mention, I did mention a while ago, I was talking about marking the end plates and marking this plate. And when I got ready to mark this one, I realized little tricks that you'll find out, like this one. There's no need in stopping that and then doing another one here. So when I brought this line, just something like this, it's fine. Just bring that line straight on out, use 1 piece of tape, cut it, and we'll lay it over. When it gets real narrow, we'll trim the back off. So little tricks like that just keeps a good continuous line. This little edge thing right here, you'll end up with one coming down. You know, you can be real careful and just butt it up to it, but it'd be kind of a weird line. Usually bring it on down, and that would get to be kind of a complicated one to incorporate into this. So, you know, just picking a good line to stop this one, and then however you're going to cover that one. So we've got 2 thin coats laid down. So at this point, I usually take my tape, and you can mark it, or, you know, if you're going to take your time, be precise. It's actually good to just mark it, but lay it up there about where it's going to go. And like I said on some of the earlier ones where the trim is, you know, you can take your tape on around to the end, make a mark. That's fine. That's something that you're going to have to be gluing around an end. This is going to get a piece of tape surrounding this end anyhow. I like to just just somewhere right around the edge of the mark here. You're gonna cut this and iron it down real good before that goes on anyhow. Whatever this angle is, you know, you don't want to come up here just with a straight edge and lay it and start. Be fine, be legal, but it just wouldn't look, you know, all finished as doing it this way. Lay in that corner, and I usually just go ahead and leave it down and come up here and just say if I'm gonna just come right around the edge of the post or wherever I'm gonna decide to terminate this, put me a mark there. Go ahead and get your pinking shears and cut that off and get that ready. All right, you got this piece ready to go on. If you're doing a wing, a lot of times if you got a helper, it's really fast. He's standing on the other end of the wing. Reach that out, you hand it to him. He pulls it down. He has a pair of shears. He does whatever he wants to hold it down. You pull it to your end, you cut it, and then you just go down through and you got all these laid out and pre-cut and sitting here waiting. I'm going to show you, there's 2 ways to do this. This is the way the manual actually says to do it. It says if you've got 2 thin coats on here, come back and do another thin coat. You're pre-wetting the 2 coats of glue, and you want to kind of hurry along and not, if it's warm outside, it's going to try to be evaporating on you. So go ahead and try to move along with it and wet it. And a lot of times when you're doing this down the long side of a fuselage, you just have to kind of do it in sections, because you can't hardly go down the whole side of something long, or say the long edge of the leading edge wing where it comes over onto the open bay. You got a lot to do. Do 4 or 5 feet at once. But once that's wet into place, just lay your tape in that. And like I mentioned before, your glue is reactivating the glue under it. So it's just right now it's just like having 3 wet coats of glue, because you reactivated. I like to go right down the center, wipe that in, and I'm not getting glue on my hands right now. I'm bedding that in. I'm working all the wrinkles out. And the reason I like doing that is every one of these stitches, that's letting this fabric come right around those stitches and not having a hollow spot. This other way I show you will work, but this is the neatest way in getting it really worked in. Especially you guys doing an Aeronica or something with the rivets, or some of the newer Cubs that had stamped ribs, and you went down and you didn't do all this stitching. I even like to stitch and make sure there's no sharp edges on a stamped rib, and on that sharp edge put a piece of masking tape or something to protect it. I still like the looks of a stitched wing, because there's just very little sticking up. You get that big rivet, you're really having to work around each one of those to get that fabric in. Once you've laid that down in your hand, then just come right back behind it and wet it in, because like I mentioned before, when I was showing you how to make a straight edge with a cut line with a razor by putting a little bit of thin glue where your line's going to be, it holds that fabric up and it makes a clean cut. It also, anytime you got fabric that's had a little bit of glue on it and it turns real white, if you try to wet that through, you've created this little barrier in the fabric, and the wetting it through doesn't happen because you're just piling on that other layer of glue. All right, that has been wetted in, so that's the way you'll do each one of these. Put your wet bed down, lay it down, rub it in with your hand, and put another wet one on top. Now, I've seen people do it this way. It's not actually the way the manual says, but it's not the end of the world. I'm going to go ahead and go kind of fast and not mark. Lay that up there. Got that edge cut. Looking at it about right here. And like I've said before, do as I say, not as I do. A lot of times when I very first started, I'd seen it done this way. Get this laid in just where it's going to be, and then hold it, because it's going to try to move with you. Start in the center and just lay the wet in. Now, a lot of times when you're laying down a piece of fabric on a wing, you're trying to square it up, and you're trying to kind of tack it down in places. You're just wetting through the fabric in places. That's fine. Going around a leading edge, this works fine. You've got a bed of glue under it. You're wetting it through with thin glue. I could go over there and take some reducer and take a rag and wipe down that, and it would do the same thing. But all I did was put thinner, and the only glue that I had was what was on the wing. By doing it this way, I'm actually carrying some glue with my reducer through. All right, now I just wetted that all the way through, and you want to stay right at the edge of your pink tape, trying not to get out of the lines. And I can see the difference in those two. This one is rubbed down a little tighter. This one has got a few more hollow spots, or I say hollow spots, light spots. Now see, I can rub my finger, and those spots will flatten on in, and it looks like they're all going to lay down good, but now I got glue on my finger. I didn't have glue on my finger a while ago because I laid the dry tape in the wet, rubbed it in, then brushed it in. So I like this way the best. You don't get glue all over your hands, and you're able to sit up here and really rub it around these to where you can do this way, but it's just another way to do it. This is actually in the manual. I ain't saying this is wrong, but this is the neater way to do it. All right, welcome back. The last time we talked, I was putting the tapes on, and I think what I explained to you is after you put down your tape, you're going to wet through, and you're going to put 2 more coats of the thin on the top of everything. On this lower end, I'm not going to put one on. I'm going to talk about it, because the reason I'm not going to put this one on, I may do something different on the back side like do a double cover or something to be able to just utilize this piece on several things. But like I said on this one, you can, some people will say if you used a 2-inch, lay it up here, measure it, same situation. Both of them could meet back here. A lot of times go ahead and take a 3-inch or whatever and mark you a center line here where you can see through it, and a center line on your piece that you're laying down. Cut your spot out, bend it over and just cut your little square out for your hinge points, and mark where your tape is going to go. Put your pencil line and mark it off good and straight to get your glue lines just where they need to be. And remember, when you put this glue on, reason we held off a while ago, that way you could go ahead and get some more heavy glue on the top of this. So a lot of times on the end here, all you'll need is 2 coats of thin, just like we talked about, and wet a thin end. But a lot of times at this point around these, sometimes I like to go ahead and maybe put a thin and then maybe add a thick on here, because you're trying to go around a corner and sometimes it just helps. But we make sure that we do get some more glue on the tops of these, or on the tops of these other tapes. So I'm not going to put this on because I may utilize it somewhere else. And I'm going to have one short video by itself on putting bias around here and explain the bias. If we didn't put bias on, people can use the regular tape, and when it goes around, you're going to have the same issue we had with it folding around, but you're going to have double that issue on both sides. So you really got to get aggressive putting a single piece of tape around there. So I'll do a short video on putting bias around that. So let's just assume you've got this trailing edge on. I let these go out over the edge. I let this one go over and hung down a little bit, trim the bottom off. Then you want to take your iron and set it, you're going to be just somewhere in this midpoint. You don't have to be at the shrinking level, but a little bit more than 250, somewhere in here. And you don't want to come in on this tape and just, start on top of it, because you could pull it a little bit. I think we may have in one of the videos talked about pre-shrunk tapes. That's when you have a dark plane, a black plane, dark navy blue. It's setting in the central part of Texas and could reach, I don't know how hot the wind could actually get, but there's been times that it's been thought that the thin wall tape could actually shrink a little and pull and try to break a paint line. So you can get pre-shrunk tapes if you know it's going to be a dark colored plane. That same effect I'm trying to avoid here is laying this iron on here and causing a shrink or a movement in the glue and moving it too. So what I like to do is just use the tip edge of the iron, and then you'll feel these edges where you've glued them. They just feel a little bit rough. You just want to take that iron and kind of just work the very tips of them paint edge and just working them down. You just want to take your time and work down all of them. You may see a little spot that looks just a little bit hollow or something's not right. Take the tip of your iron, kind of work that down again. And you can tell after you went over it that it feels a lot. You can take one spot and really work it and feel it, and then feel roughness. So if you can make it a little smoother, take your time and really work each one of them out. All the little angles, if you're looking for any little imperfections, any spot of, if you had a spot of glue there, if there's a time that you need to take some reducer, or sometimes you can take an iron and just kind of heat it and mash it out. You want it where you can't feel it. So at this point, you would be finishing up and doing all the final ironing, and that's where we would go over into ready to do some fabric wash and cleaning it and getting ready to prime. At this point, you'd probably be having your drain grommets put on, or burning your hole in for your drain or whatever. So that concludes the part of just covering and putting the tapes on, and I'll have a separate video explaining a little bit on bias tapes.